Hi, welcome to this podcast on the testing cycle. The testing cycle is basically a procedure or guides you through developing a sign language test. I will go through those different steps and procedures now on. The very first thing is that you need to have a rationale why you actually want to develop a test. Think about it. For example, you have to develop an entrance exam or a final exam in an interpreter training program. The next step are constraints, or things you need to think about what might constrain your test development. That could be something like from a university that you have to develop specific kinds of tests, but most often it will be maybe money. So maybe you want to assess a range of sign language skills in your students, but you don't have the money or the resources to do so. So most of the constraints will be actually economically based. Yeah. This next step is to define the purpose of your test. For example, do you want to develop an achievement test, which will be a test at the end of one semester? For example, you want to assess your students in a sign language class after the first or second semester. Or it could be a placement test. That's another purpose. For example, a student who studied in a different program wants to transfer to your program, but you don't know how his or her sign language skills are. So you want to do a placement test to see at which level in the sign language class they fit best. Or it could be a proficiency test, basically looking into the sign language competencies of learners for their future use. For example, if you want to become a professor at Gallaudet University, or if you want to become a sign language interpreter, you need to have specific skills at a certain level in order to get a post or to be admitted to a program. Next thing is that you decide on the content. So do you want to assess receptive skills, productive skills, and/or interaction, or vocabulary knowledge? That's something you need to define before we actually get started developing the items. And the next step, after you have decided on the contents, you kind of write down this test specification, which basically is a document like a blueprint, which defines the different sections of your test, how many items you want to have, how long it takes to take the test, what's the different skills you want to test. For example, you want to test not only on the level of comprehension and production, but you want to more go into depth to define it. Basically, this test specification really guides you in concrete terms on what you do next when you really start focusing on developing the items and the tasks. When you have a productive test, you might want to think about how you want to score it. For example, you think about a very easy vocabulary test, where the beginning learner should be able to produce a number of lexical signs. You want to think about it, how you want to score that. Basically, it could be just an correct decision, but you need to be aware about, for example, what about variance? What about slightly variance in the production of a student? Where's the border where you say this is wrong and this is right? So you need to devise an instrument. It could be Excel based, it could be a paper where you define where you have your items and your scoring criteria and how you sum up your score at the end. Once you have thought about how you want to score a test and you did the scoring actually, you want to think about how the scores are being reported back to the learner but not only to the learner, maybe also you need to feed it into a system at your university, and how those scores are being interpreted. So what does it mean actually? Does it have consequences? Is this an achievement test? What is the consequences when someone doesn't pass a test at the end of a course? What's happening? Does the student have to retake the course? Does he still can move on? Or what about a proficiency test? What about if someone wants to become an interpreter but doesn't have the necessary silent skills to work as an interpreter? So think about, it's not only about the interpretation, it's also about consequences, what we do with scores. Before you actually start using a test you have developed operationally, you want to conduct a pilot study first in order to find out if different aspects of the test actually works. That means, for example, in a receptive skills test where you have, for example, multiple choice answers, you want to see if those work. You want to see if the whole of the scoring instrument work. You want to see also if you get feedback from the test takers themselves. And you want to revise the test based on that feedback, on the results of your pilot study, make changes, conduct a main study before you actually use it operationally, because it has consequences. And a very important part of in this process of developing a test is the training of the tester or test administrator and the raters. Test administrator is someone who is conducting a test. Yeah, that could be who guides someone through a test, welcomes someone in a test center, guides them to the place. Maybe it could be a one-on-one situation. Exactly. The other one is the rater. Rating could be done live, which is a very tough job, but could be done or is also done. But rating will also be done after the actual testing. So, for example, you have a test, an interview situation between a learner and a tester. The interview or the conversation is being video recorded and being rated afterwards by 2 independent raters or 3 independent raters. They have a scoring instrument, they have certain criteria defined what they should look at, for example, the use of space, non-manual features, stuff like that, turn-taking rules. And the rater really need to know what's on the scoring instruments to match it to the language use of the learner. So, and they should have, the important thing is that there's an agreement between the raters. Well, that's it. We are at the end of the testing cycle. After that, you got a very first version of a test that can be used in classroom or also for other purposes. Thanks a lot for your attention.